The views, comments, stories, and opinions shared within this podcast are my own or those of my guests, and in no way represent the views of the company or companies that I or we work for. All stories, events, and tales shared within this episode may or may not have happened in the manner in which they are told. They may or may not have even happened at all. The details have been changed to protect the innocent and the guilty alike. This is Squawk Ident.
You're listening to Squawk Ident, an aviation podcast dedicated to the journey and the challenges surrounding the life and career of Aviator Tony and his guests. Together, we will explore the many pathways to an aviation profession, the realities of what a professional aviator can expect in today's marketplace, and we share many stories along the way. I'm your host, Aviator Tony, an airline pilot currently flying for a legacy airline with close to 20 years on the flight line. This is episode 32 of Squawk Ident, recorded on the 17th of March, 2020, from the Aviator Sound Studios somewhere in Southern California. On this episode of Squawk Ident, I am joined by an aviation couple that have had the opportunity to share their journey in aviation together. I first met Jeri in 2017 when she was just getting back into the airline world after 13 years away from the profession. She and her husband Ty have been able to navigate the many downturns and celebrate great accomplishments, all while raising a family. From sound engineering to space camp to civil air patrol and more, they both have been an inspiration to me for many years, and today I was able to interview them. Their journeys have been filled with love and sacrifice. At a time when what we need more of is positivity and celebration, I am honored to share our discussion with all of you. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show, right after a brief word from our sponsors. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the show. What a week this has been. Most of us have been feeling the anxiety and the stresses associated with the events surrounding this coronavirus pandemic. It has threatened our way of life, our well-being, and our daily routines. And today, I want to take a break from all of those scary thoughts that surround us. You may be plugging away at work, working a double or triple overtime shift right now, like a lot of my friends over at Costco are doing, or under self-quarantine or house arrest, like most of my friends and family in the Bay Area are in the middle of right now. Either way, let's take a break from all that noise and bring some positive and inspirational stories to your day. Here at Squawk Ident, I have been delighted in bringing to all of you examples of an aviator's journey in a career field that is mostly filled with a shared passion to soar above the clouds and peer away at the starry night from 37,000 feet. Today's story is of no exception to all of that. Joining us on this episode of Squawk Ident is a spectacular couple that have shared not only a home, but have also shared a career in aviation. They have been together for over 20 years and have a wonderful story to tell. He started out as an audio engineer and decided one day to start taking flying lessons. Working his way through his CFI, he instructed, he flew freight, and then he achieved a position at Trans-States Airlines. He upgraded about a year later, and while in upgrade class, met the love of his life. She is a graduate from the University of Central Missouri in aviation management, a former Trans-States Airlines pilot, a former Sandpiper Regional pilot, and currently a pilot for an airline we call Domestic Air. She currently holds type ratings at a Jetstream 32, an Embraer 145, and a Boeing 737. She is also a mother of 4 beautiful young adults, an avid runner, and a total rock star. She's been a LOSA observer, a LOSA analyst, and a pilot mentor. She's also involved with women in aviation and the Civil Air Patrol. Please help me in welcoming to the show, Ty and Jeri. Hey guys, how you doing? And
hey,
welcome.
Tony. Thanks.
So, guys, this is so exciting. I've been very excited to be able to sit down with you and kind of talk about your journey. Been looking forward to it. And, as we mentioned, it's kind of a tough time right now. So let's bring some positivity to it. Ty, you kind of started out in a very interesting career field, a little similar to what I was going through with when I also changed careers. You were in audio engineering. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah. Well, it was a lot of fun, and it was a good thing to do in my early 20s. I did mostly live sound, so I worked in a lot of nightclubs. I did some concert venues. My social life was basically work, and that was fun. But it ran its course, and I found that I really enjoyed flying a whole lot more. I started out flying as a hobby that I just continued, just kept going with it.
Yeah.
Here I am.
What got you to walk into that flight center or flight school that first day? Was it someone suggesting that you do it, or just the curiosity got the best of you and you just walked in?
Yeah, that's a good question. Kind of both. I always wanted to fly. I never really pictured myself as an airline pilot or even an airplane pilot. I just thought, man, that'd be cool to just fly. And maybe I watched too much Superman when I was a kid. I don't know. But I was at work one day, and one of the guys that I worked with had taken a ride on a small airplane the day before, and he was all excited about it. He said, "Hey, a friend of mine took me up in a small airplane." And I said, I got a couple of bucks in my pocket. I think I'm going to go do the same thing. So I literally called the first flight school in the phone book and said, "Hey, what's it take to get a pilot's license?" They said, "Come on out." And I did.
Yeah. Then was it a Cessna program or something else?
Eventually it was. I soloed in a Tomahawk. It was a very small flight school. They had one Tomahawk, and I think they had two 150s, Cessna 150s. And I soloed in the Tomahawk. I lost my instructor because things were moving a little bit back then, and as they tend to do. So my next instructor, I think, didn't love the Tomahawk, let's say. So transitioned me over to the 150. And I finished up my private in the 150.
And, that process, we're talking, what year was this? This is somewhere in the 80s or?
Yeah, early 90s. So
early 90s, yeah.
Yeah, actually my the first hour in my logbook was 1990. I think it took me about a year of saving up every week or two, take a lesson.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually I finally finished my private. And by the time I got my private done, I decided I was all in. So, but it took me a year to get that first ticket.
Yeah. And then you were mentioning to me that, you worked your way through all your ratings into a CFI, and then you had to take a little bit of break because of finances, which is absolutely understandable. And we've all that have gone through the process, especially around that time frame, did that. What were you doing while you were kind of in that pause transition? Were you working at all? Or?
Sort of in limbo there. Yeah, I was still doing audio, so I worked at night, and I worked live sound at night. I went to a 141 school to continue my my flying education right up through CFI. At the end of it, there weren't a lot of jobs, so I actually joined the Civil Air Patrol and got a little experience that way. Continued working at night doing audio. Then I finally landed my first CFI job, and what I did then at that point, I needed to get my dual I, so I had a student that owned his own airplane that didn't mind if I took it, and I took his airplane, did a check ride in that. Let's see, I did a weekend course to get my multi, one of those kind of quick all ATP type deals.
Mm-hmm.
And when I got my MEI, I got my MEI on a recurrent 135 ride.
Oh,
So I had a 135 checkout. The flight school I worked for had a small charter operation, and I flew the Navajo. So on my early check ride, I said, "Hey, can we get a Fed in here? I'd like to maybe pick up a rating." So the Fed came in, gave me my ride, and signed off my MEI
wow. That was
that way.
smart.
So that was a pretty good deal. Yeah.
Yeah. And this
Cheap,
is what
maybe.
airport was. Yeah. Well, you have to be creative, especially when you're trying to build hours and get ratings. And, it's not a cheap
Oh,
thing to
yeah.
do. It's an expensive process. So, that was actually very smart for you to do that. What airport was this where you were doing most of your training?
The airport that I was teaching out of is a very small field just north of Philadelphia called Wings Field.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, and at the time, and I don't know, I know they're still there because I fly over and I see some activity when I go into Philly. But at the time, that airport was the oldest airport in the U.S. that in continuous operation in the U.S. So
Wow.
that was kind of a neat little tidbit there.
Yeah. Yeah. And have you been back at all recently to check it out or?
Yeah, a few years later, I did stop in and nobody was there. Everybody had moved on, and I didn't know a single person at the
Yeah.
airport.
Yeah. And
So
which is
I have to
definitely
say,
happens, especially, with the progress that has been made with hiring over the years. And I mean, it's kind of hard to stay in one place until you kind of reach that final point where at least where you think you're going to settle for a long period of time. And you were working your way up through your ratings. You got your MEI. You flight instructed for quite some time. Was that at the same airport there?
yeah, so I taught out of that airport for a good 2.5 years. And then on my, oh boy, back then, man, you worked your butt off. I would instruct 6 days a week. They gave us one day off, but we got all the instructors got the option to be on call for the charter department on your day off. So I basically worked 7 days a week. And when I got enough multi-time, a friend of mine worked at an airport, at Reading Airport, which is just maybe an hour away from Wings Field.
Uh-huh.
And he was flying freight and asked me to come and sit in the right seat with him so I could build up a little bit of multi-time. It was a Part 91 operation, flying pharmaceuticals around.
Oh, wow.
I got to log a little bit of Cessna time that way, a little 310 time.
Oh, 310,
and that's
yeah.
how I got multi-time.
Did you have any harrowing experiences in the 310 with weather or maintenance or anything?
Not at that company. I moved around a couple of times. I worked for 3 different freight companies. The last one that I worked for, I did have I blew a cylinder in the 310. That was almost a non-event. The engine kind of kept running, and I shut it down out of precaution, but it just kind of made a bang and wasn't producing as much power, so I shut it down. VMC, not a real big deal. The one thing that did happen there, though, is I landed on ice. This was up in Williamsport, Pennsylvania. I touched down on ice, and it was very slick ice. I did that reverted rubber hydroplaning that we read about, when you're getting your ratings.
Yeah.
It melted the tires on me. I was totally not prepared for that. I was prepared for it to be slippery, so it was, landing was no big deal. But then tagging off the runway, because the tires just melted on me.
Yeah, a little flat spot there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Jeri, during this time, somewhere around here, you were attending school, right? Going to an aviation-based university there. A little bit of Central Missouri time there. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, I started out a little bit earlier than that flying. I was 16. I was looking back in my logbook. I was 16 And I'd always wanted to fly, and I don't know why. I went to an aviation camp. I was looking through pictures recently. I went to it was called Aviation Challenge, and I don't even really remember what we did, but we went to some aviation museum. Can't even tell you where it was. Um, but I did that. I went to space camp. I was lucky enough to go there.
That's so
It
cool.
was really cool.
Yeah.
Go back now. And then I wanted to learn how to fly, and I talked to my parents about it, and my dad had always wanted to learn how to fly, which I didn't really know that. I didn't really understand that, he would actually want to learn how to fly. So we started learning how to fly together.
Mm.
So I was
you and your dad.
16 when I started. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I was 16. We started taking flying. I took a few intro flights. Didn't start getting serious till I was closer to 17. So I was a junior when I started, a senior in high school when I started flying more seriously. But we started flying at the same little airport. It was in Fenton, Missouri, called Weiss Airport, and it's not even there anymore. It flew. The short final was right over a highway, so they took it away, and now it's got all kinds of factory warehouses.
That's sad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, because every now and again we'll drive by when we visit home.
Yeah. So you started out at a young age. I mean, and your dad and your family kind of helped you go after this dream, this adventure in aviation, and wow, space camp. I mean, that's amazing. And the fact that you did some training with your father, talk about bonding time. Is he still flying, or what? How's that working?
He's not flying anymore, but he went all the way through CFI.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, he taught for a little while at little airport near their home. And then my mom, flying with him all the time, she got her private pilot license too.
Very good.
So,
and also a very good idea. I don't think we've kind of mentioned this yet in the show. But for general aviation purposes, if you're out there flying along and you're flying with your family, and especially those, I've had students in the past in my days of instructing as well, where they went out and bought an airplane and said, yeah, every weekend we're going to go up to a cabin that we bought and we're going to fly up there and the whole family is going to be on board. Well, I always used to caution them saying, okay, that's great. You're instrument rated, you're whatever you are, private pilot license, but somebody else in the airplane needs to be familiar with at least being able to talk on the radio and land. And the fact that your father kind of got your mom into it to the point where she got a private pilot license, that's not only smart, that's safe. And that's wonderful.
Yeah. So they would come up eventually I got my private pilot license my senior year of high school. And then the next year when I went away to college, they would come up. They would fly up a lot of weekends and come up, and we'd go fly together or do some safety pilot stuff for each other. And so it was a good way to visit and spend time together doing something we all loved.
And how did that progress into your further ratings?
I flew. So the school I went to, Central Missouri State at the time, did have a flight department. I started out flying in their flight department the first semester. And then for the second semester, my first year, I got an internship at an airport down the road, Part 91 school, doing some safety related stuff for the flight school there. And my boss there, who's still my friend and works at Legacy Airlines with you, he said if he gave me a deal where if I finished up my ratings there and worked for him for at least a year after I finished school, that I got a deal on my flying, on my ratings.
Oh, cool.
So I did that. So I finished the rest of my ratings with him. I did my instrument, commercial, and most of my CFI, and I actually finished up my CFI my last summer after I graduated back in St. Louis. Um,
So you were continuously working on your ratings throughout school, throughout your college days, and
right.
Yeah, and that turned out to give you an opportunity to instruct. Was it at Columbia Regional?
Yeah. So I finished. I flight instructed in Sedalia for almost 2 years and did some Part 91. It was all in a single engine 172, but there was an architecture firm that we flew around to some local sites. But then eventually got a job in Columbia, Missouri, where they had, I did start just flight instructing for them in singles, but they had the opportunity to get some multi-time. So that's why I went there. They had a Baron that I eventually did some 135 flights in.
Okay, so you were working on getting some charter time and some instruction time, and how long were you doing that in Columbia?
That was right about a year.
About a year, and then were you just applying to regionals to kind of get your foot in the door, or how did that process work? Okay, here you are, you're instructing, you're building time, you've got a load of students that are keeping you busy, and you're constantly submitting applications. And at that time it was, I don't know, what was the primary method was with airlineapps.com or something like that, or to just kind of get them out there.
Yeah. I guess it was. I can't even remember what the application process was like.
Was there even
I feel like it was still paper.
I think it was. I don't remember aviationapps.com back. I don't remember any .com back then.
Yeah. Well, this was somewhere around late 90s.
Yeah.
And so
it
was all Kit Darby back then,
Yeah. Walking in the airport, chief pilot's office, and all about who you knew, and can you walk my resume in for me?
Yeah. And I didn't know anybody yet at the regionals at that point. So, but I had, I guess, I had built up some multi-time and flight instruction. And so, I ended up getting a job at Trans-States.
Yeah.
As a first officer there for my first airline job.
Yeah. So, and you were on the Jetstream 32?
So I was on the Jetstream 32.
Okay. So there you were. You're in new hire training class. This handsome young man catches your eye, or was it the other way around?
Wait, I think we ended up being kind of study partners. Jeri was the youngest one in the class, and she ended up without a partner initially because they would always pair the new hires with the upgrades. And she was just kind of on her own. So she started hanging out with my partner and I, and, kind of practicing flows and running checklists and doing all the study stuff and bouncing things off of each other. We kind of hit it off and became really good friends initially before there was any kind of romance going on. Although I suspect she wanted me from the beginning.
Yeah, of course you did. So here you were studying together, and Jeri, your first airline, Ty, was this your first airline as well?
It is. Yeah, it was.
It was. So you had been there, 12 months or a little more than 12 months before you upgraded. So you had a little bit of seniority on her. But here you are, you're studying your first airline, and this is in an era before, computer-based training, before EFBs, before online coursework. This was all, here's a book, read the book, study the book, come to class, we're going to go over that system. Tomorrow, read this part, we're going to go over that system. In that era of really having to, study and read and put the time in, you weren't just studying questions to kind of get you past the test. And I hate to say that, but that really is the way AQP is kind of developed into. So you really had to get a good, thorough, comprehensive knowledge, comprehensive understanding of systems, because the test bank, as you know, in the past, this PTS, you had 1,000 questions and they're all fair game. This was kind of challenging, and not everybody really succeeded in this, because some people are just doers and hands-on and not really coursework studying. What was, and this is a question for both of you, what was the biggest challenge in that process, in that studying on paper, getting that understanding? Like, what parts of that were the most challenging for you?
I like that. I have notebooks still that I have from those airplanes, from the Jetstream 32 and then eventually the 145. I like taking notes. I like reading the book, taking notes. So to me, I prefer it. It was
so you were in your prime then. You were really yeah. So it's easier for you than say some.
Yeah, maybe. But yes, I liked it.
Yeah. How about you, Tyler?
And, I think and you touched on AQP, which is very different than where we came from. Obviously, obvious to us. I don't know about to all the listeners, but I kind of think AQP is much better than it was back then, and I think the biggest challenge for me was the unpredictability of your check airman or your APD.
Yeah,
because those guys, and I'll say I won't call them out by name, but we had two guys at Trans-States that would compete over who got more busts. They thought that was. They thought that was a badge of pride. They thought that, the more people we wash out, the stronger and safer our airline's going to be. It was that old school philosophy where you beat your pilots until they're better. And and it's nice to live in a world that you don't have that anymore. It's also nice to have survived that world, I guess.
Yeah.
But it was the unpredictability of it. And so going through upgrade, as a new hire, these guys had to know everything. As an upgrade, you had to know everything plus all the nonsense trivia about the airplane. And we would sit there, the upgrade captains, we'd sit there just asking each other ridiculous questions just to see, well, this guy might ask us. We had one guy that asked who made the seatbelts in the airplane on the check ride. He was dead serious. So we just throw trivia at each other, trying to okay, who can know the most ridiculous stuff about this airplane? None of it helped us.
Right. It's not going to help you in an emergency. Oh, well, I'm going to talk to that manufacturer when we land.
Yeah. None of it helped you as a pilot, but it did help you exercise your brain muscle, I guess.
Yeah. No, I do prefer today's check rides over those check rides.
Yeah. I wouldn't even call them check rides. What are they calling them now? Maneuvers validation and much less stress, more focused on flying the airplane, knowing what you need to know. And I think the training has streamlined. And now with AQP, they can only ask the questions that are pertinent to whatever aircraft you're on and that the FAA has approved upon this training cycle. So like you said, Ty, the training today is a lot more streamlined. It's a little bit easier. There's less variety. There's less rogue DEs or APDs or, this is designated examiners for those of the listeners that don't quite get all the millions of acronyms that are in this industry. So
we throw a lot around, don't we?
Yes. Yeah. There's actually a guy I follow on social media that has a puppet, and you guys probably have seen this guy.
Oh yeah.
And he did a song and it's all acronyms and it's great. Maybe if I find it, I'll put it in the show notes. But so here you were, you guys were, you met, you're training together, you're studying together, and you're both on the Jetstream. Did you ever get to fly together?
We did.
We flew together a lot.
Yeah.
I've never added up the hours, but
and back then, of course, it was scheduling wasn't all computerized like they are now, because now it's like a game of Tetris. They just fill holes on their computer screen. Back then, if something came open, you could call them and say, "Hey, man, put me on this trip, will you?" Yeah. So I think we did that with each other.
Yeah.
Hey, I got a day off. I see this is open. Can I have it? Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you guys got along in the cockpit. Did you have this kind of mentality where, okay, when we're at work, we're flying, and we're going to leave all the personal out of it? Or was it more that the relationship was so good that, you could look over at each other and be like, no, we're not going to do that. Any challenges there?
It sounds corny, but we really get along really well. Like,
yeah.
So we didn't have issues. We rarely have issues anyway, like over the last 20 something years.
That's crazy.
That we've
right?
been together, except if he's driving and I'm in the other seat.
We don't talk about that. We don't talk about that. Driving in couples.
Yeah, driving a car.
I recently saw I don't know if it was like a video or a joke or an audio, but I remember it. And it was this past few weeks, and this couple, they're in the kitchen, and the husband is like, no, you're burning the onions. No, you got to spin them faster. No, you got to add a little bit more water. Put more butter on there. You didn't put enough salt. And the wife goes, what is wrong with you? And he goes, well, I just wanted you to feel what it's like when we're driving together.
See, she'd be on the complaining side both ways, because I do all the cooking.
He could yell at me about how I clean up.
I would never do that to you. You know what? It's funny that it brings up the question you asked made me think our chief pilot would tell the same stupid joke every time we'd see him. We'd walk through the crew room.
We loved our chief pilot.
Yeah. And every time he'd see us both, he'd go, hey, when you guys are flying together, because I was the captain and she was the first officer. Uh-huh. He'd go, you're the captain, right? I'm like, yeah. He goes, well, who's really in charge?
every day we saw him in the office.
Every day. It wasn't like every now and again.
Did you guys go through that Part 61 training with this King schools with John and Martha King? Okay. So did you ever watch, they did a series, and this is back, VHS tapes. You could buy the VHS tapes and you'd throw them in your VCR. And
I still have them. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you really? I had them for the longest time. I don't know where they are. But so, and they did one on the Citation jet. And John King was like, and when we're in the Citation jet, the roles are very, clearly defined. And I don't call Martha honey, I call her captain. And I say, well, captain. So I'll never forget that. So when you said that, I was like, oh boy, yeah, I can see where Chief Pilot could, crack that joke every day. But
I did call Jeri honey in the cockpit, and the reason I remember this is because we were cruising along one time in the Embraer. We'd both moved over to the Embraer, and the Embraer 145, the RJ, and we were talking. And all of a sudden, I couldn't hear her. And I said, honey, I can't hear you. Honey, speak up, honey. In my mind, I remember saying honey about 50 times. I probably said it once. But then I realized my mic was stuck. And I was transmitting over center frequency.
Honey, can I get a better altitude? I'm going to try that.
So once I figured it out, and I caught myself from letting an expletive go and unstuck my mic. Somebody gets on, another airline pilot gets on the frequency, and he gets his big deep voice. He goes, hey, make sure you tell honey we said hi.
That's wonderful.
I forgot about that.
Do you remember?
So you guys flew together, two type ratings there at Transstates, and then how did that progression work into you guys ended up getting married, pulling the trigger, going for it, and then the children started to be in play here. And Jeri, what happened there? Did you decide, well, it's time to raise a family and you kind of put aviation aside, or did you work both for a while? How did that progression work?
So when we started having kids I was pregnant with our first, and I was still flying. I flew until I was about 7.5 months pregnant. And then we're looking at everything. We were looking at what it would cost to have a nanny, what, if there was possibly anybody we had in the family that could help, but no one at the time could, full time come help us, because we would both be gone 4 days a week flying for a regional airline at the time, and post 9/11, and the industry wasn't good. So we had no family. Nanny would take about my whole schedule, my whole pay at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And we just decided we didn't want to go that way. And so at about 7.5, 8 months pregnant, I went on leave. And I didn't quit until after our first, that daughter was born.
Mm-hmm.
But a few months later, I was still on leave, and my manager called, my flight manager called and said, are you coming back to work?
Yeah.
And so we had to make the decision then, yes, no. So I decided to stay home, and I just at the time didn't want, without having family, I didn't want to be gone 4 days a week.
Right.
With someone watching the baby that I didn't know.
And our schedules were full back then too. It like now working for a major airline, we both have 17, 18 days off a month.
Mm-hmm.
But then you'd be lucky to have 12.
Yeah.
So I mean, you're gone. Most of your life is gone.
Right.
Yeah.
You're gone more than you're home, for sure.
Yeah.
And I think most people that are not in aviation don't really understand that. They look at you and go, well, you get paid really well, right? Aren't you home a bunch of days a week? I'm like, yeah, but those aren't, I'm not home evenings and mornings. I'm gone for 4 or 5, 6 days, depending on your schedule. And then when you get home, you're exhausted because you've been, in multiple time zones, even in a regional. And it's a tough decision to make. And, that's something I think most aviators, especially, men, it's traditionally a male-dominated industry, and you get a lot of attitudes from men like, well, okay, they're going to have a baby and they're going to go. But that's a tough decision, and I can't imagine how difficult that is, because every aviator knows, there's a passion there for flying. You got to love it, because otherwise, why would you put yourself through all that turmoil and all that time away? And so you love it, and you have to make that decision to stay home. You made the decision. You made a great decision to raise a family. And how was that difficult at times throughout afterwards? Or was it always like, nope, I made the right decision and I'd do it again 100 times?
No, it was. And even now looking back, I'm flying with people that started when I started, and they're captains. And, I do go through like, I could be at that place in the industry. And I think when I did quit, it was shortly after 9/11. And so I think the industry hadn't been in such a bad place. Maybe I would have stayed working as well, because work at that time was not as fun as it always sometimes is.
Yeah.
Or it has been at other points in the industry.
Our careers weren't very promising then either. That was definitely went into the decision. We looked at it and said, we're going nowhere for who knows how long. Nobody's hiring.
Yeah, so that played a big role. Really, looking back, I don't regret it. I loved staying home. I still, when I go to work now, I'm kind of sad that I'm not there to make breakfast for the kids. I did all the cute lunches, and became the PTO president at my kids' school, and did all the, crazy mom stuff. So I'm glad I got to do that. Had I been able to get at a better job position, I think I could have done both and been happy, but it's just not where the industry was at the time.
Yeah. And you have to kind of judge, I think, the sacrifices to do that. And like you said, there are many factors at play, and the industry was trying to recuperate and turned into, what no one really ever imagined being that lost decade, the 10-year progression that after 9/11 that happened, that there just was so much stagnation that nobody was going anywhere, and people were on forever reserve and forever FO, and there just wasn't that progression that moved forward. So, the timing really did play a big role in the decision. And so you were out for how many years?
13.
So 13 years. So
13 out of the 121 industry.
And your kids grew, and as soon as they were starting to get into high school and junior high, you started to see an opportunity. And we were talking about it earlier. You felt a calling, right?
That's right.
And you said, well, the aviation industry is picking up. It's time to get back into it. And that's when we met. At a very exciting time when we first flew together. You were able to gain a position at what we here at Squawk Ident called Sandpiper Airways. And how did that progression work? Now, here we are. Well, what year was that?
2017.
2017. So did you just start applying? Did you kind of get back into GA and build some time to get warmed up? Or how did that progression work?
Yeah. So while I was staying home, I did start flying general aviation. I flew for the Civil Air Patrol. Tyler recommended it after he had been there. And so where we lived in Georgia, it has a fantastic unit, Civil Air Patrol unit there. It's a big group, so there was a lot of flying. So I started flying for them, flight instructing and doing search and rescue missions for the Civil Air Patrol. And it was great. I was back. They had a weekly meeting. I got to hang out with a group of aviators again once a week and do some flying. So I did that for the last few years prior to trying to get at a regional. So I could do it on my own time. It was all volunteer flying. It's not paid, but a great organization. And I know you've interviewed someone prior that did Civil Air Patrol flying,
yes.
But for kids and adults and working with the kids. And there were several homeschool kids in our community that I would teach to fly during the day while my kids were at school.
Oh, so cool.
So, I would do that, and I would, like I said, do search and rescue or aerial photography for the government.
Yeah, and Tyler, during this time, you were in it. What was your progression from Trans-States? What did you do after that?
From Trans-States, I went and got a job with a now defunct airline who was bought by my current airline. That's how I ended up where I am now. So I've been a first officer for 10 years at this point, I guess. And which was kind of interesting, because I'd been a captain most of my time at Trans-States. I was 14 years at Trans-States, and I moved into the late seat of a 717, which I flew for 4 years before I transitioned over. It was a good time. It was a good learning experience. Another type rating, and being in an airline that is that's been bought by another airline, and you've got a job to go to. It was an interesting experience because as they're shrinking us, we didn't have a lot of flying. And so I stayed on reserve the entire time. I didn't work a lot. I kind of stayed home, trained for a marathon.
Yeah.
Got a lot of projects done.
Built a tree house.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a wonderful experience too, because here you are, you've got a new family and your kids are growing and they're in school and you're able to be home more, even though, reserve flying has its set of challenges. Were you, where were you based at that first,
Atlanta.
you're in Atlanta, so you were commuting?
Yeah. And so, initially we were commuting, or I was commuting, and we had decided the place we lived in the St. Louis area, but we didn't love the school system that we were in, and we had planned on moving anyway.
Mm.
And even though, even though my airline was already slated for closure, we decided to move to the Atlanta area, just so I wouldn't have to commute to reserve.
Yeah.
And commuting to reserve is tough, man, and especially when you've got, I think we had 11 days off on reserve there.
Ooh.
So I went from 11 days off to 20 days off a month, basically, because I'm on call, but they wouldn't call me.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're on reserve and at home at a carrier and kind of low on the totem pole, I mean, that's a completely different way of life. It's a completely different job.
It
And,
is.
to take advantage of that, you're very fortunate to take advantage of that, be home with the kids, be home with Jeri, and yeah, amazing that you got to do that.
It was great.
Yeah,
We
it
did all
was.
kinds of stuff.
Mhm.
I built a hoverboard with my leaf blower for the kids. We did all kinds of stuff, right?
Yeah.
It was nice.
And that airline you mentioned was bought out by, and we're going to call it Domestic Air, just obviously because you don't represent your airline as I don't represent mine. So to protect
Right.
ourselves here at Squawk Ident, we kind of changed the names of our current carriers so that they can't go, well, you don't have authority to talk, on a format like a podcast. So Domestic Air currently flying nationwide, big company. And how did that transition go for you, Ty, from getting bought out, having you mentioned there was a little bit of shrink and reduction of flying, you're on reserve a long time. The airline obviously was struggling a little bit, and then it got bought out by this Domestic Air. How did that transition go? Was there some animosity? Was there issues with pilot groups and work groups and unions? And was that transition relatively smoothless?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's always going to be a bit of animosity. I think that you've got two groups, and I mean, we're pilots. We all think that we're the best thing in the world. That's just how it works, right? So each group thought they were deserved more than they were getting, I think. And it's like every other merger, every successful merger I've heard said, if everybody walks away a little disappointed, it was successful.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of how it went. Nobody felt like they got a better deal than the other guy. And I do feel like it was a great deal for me because it happened as soon as I got hired there. So my entire tenure at that airline was basically just sitting there waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Mm.
And it was a better deal. It's a bigger airline. The pay is better. The schedules are better, and in a much better financial position than the airline that hired me. So right now, going through kind of the crisis that we're dealing with, I don't feel threatened. I feel like I'll have a job in 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
Where the other airline, I probably wouldn't feel so secure.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a tough time. I mean, you guys both lived through it with the 9/11 event and how that crippled the airline for so long. So it's not your first rodeo out here. And well, maybe we'll get into a little bit of that a little bit later. But let's talk a little bit about that transition to the 737 for you. Was that a relatively seamless training transition? You're now working for a very large airline that has primarily 737s, at least they traditionally do and had. Was that training cycle a little bit better for you?
It was. They had already sort of transitioned over to the whole AQP philosophy, It was all training. There was quite a bit of self-study, and it's always like drinking out of the fire hose. But the training was very positive. Everybody was very helpful. And the 737, it's a slippery airplane. It doesn't like to slow down. But other than that, it's a very basic, easy airplane to fly, I think. The 7-1, I think, was a little more difficult to fly, but you could get it to slow down a lot easier. So with the 7-3, you just have to back up everything you're doing by about 10 miles, and as long as you can wrap your head around that, you're good.
Yeah. And the MAX issue, which now has been dwarfed, obviously, by everything else that's going on. No one's talking about the MAX, right? But that's a pretty major event for your airline. Did you see an initial reduction of flying, and did that affect the pilot group at all when that started to roll out?
Yeah, that's it did. It affected our airline quite a bit because all of our growth projection was predicated on the MAX, and they yanked the rug out from under us. So they continued to hire, which has been great for us because they hired Jeri. And if they had cut off hiring, we would have been at normal staffing levels. Now we're overstaffed.
Mm-hmm.
And the company knows that, and so therefore our line values have all gone down significantly. That I think that a lot of the pilots I fly with aren't super happy about that. I'm not super happy about it, but we're still, even with this crisis going on, we're still anticipating a return of the MAX, possibly some growth in the future, and that'll keep, hopefully that'll keep everybody on property.
Yeah. And then Jeri, we met. Was it, you said 2017?
Yeah, summer of 2017.
Yeah. So you were a new hire at Sandpiper Regional, and so you got back into the game. You were able to apply and get a job there, and we flew together soon after you went through your training. Is that correct?
It was only, I was looking back, you were maybe my third or fourth trip after IOE.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah. I remember that trip vividly because I was listening to your story, as we often do. When you first meet someone, you're going to fly together with them. You're in a relatively intimate space in the phone booth, as I call it. Flying an airplane around and doing, at the regional, at least, 3, 4, 5 legs a day sometimes. And I got to hear your story, and I just thought, wow, this lady's a rock star, raising a family, raising a family, and then coming back to it. And just the fact that you were coming back to it, and hit it with such velocity, got right into it. And we ended up running together. We were in Springfield, I think, Missouri.
Yeah, Champaign.
Well, that was
you're
the second time.
Right.
Yeah. Springfield.
Yep.
And we got to hear each other's stories, hear about each other's families. And it was just such a positive, delight to fly with you. And you weren't an FO for very long, were you?
Yeah, it was just about 6 months.
Yeah.
So
your previous experience made a big difference in your progression.
Yes. Yeah. Just shortly after I got hired, Sandpiper started hiring captains directly, direct entry captains.
Mm-hmm.
So if you had the previous 121 time, and I was a captain back at Trans-States, you could, there weren't many people that were already there that were doing it. They were getting directly hired. But since I was there, I moved right up to upgrade about 6 months after I started.
Yep. And then right before you did that, you had, I think, one of your final flights as an FO. We ended up in Champaign, as you mentioned, together. And all four of us, right? All four members of the crew, we all went for a run together.
Your FO and me and my captain, yeah, we all went running around the campus.
Yeah, and that was a pretty cool thing to do, because that's not the usual. You know, you don't usually get to meet up with multiple crews and go do something you all enjoy. We all enjoyed running. We were all runners, so
yeah.
You know, look at those pilots running around campus. That's great. They only knew we were pilots because we were all wearing our pilot hat, right? No, just kidding. We had that was on our back of our t-shirts. I'm a pilot.
Yeah.
Yeah. No.
Yeah. They could usually pick us out in the bar or the restaurant anyway. We're the ones with the white sneakers and the.
Yeah, I'm gonna buy some New Balance stocks
from the 80s.
No, I know. I call home to Tyler and tell him how much I'm loving being back. Getting to hang out with a cool captain. The laid back, having fun, going running. Yeah.
Yep.
You made it a good trip.
Good. I'm glad. It was great for me too. And so you upgraded right after that. So there you were, captain on the 145 again. How was that experience? Was that pretty seamless?
It was easy. The whole coming back to the 121 world was easier than I had anticipated. It was kind of scary coming back after 13 years, and am I gonna, be good enough and be able to do this? And I think coming back to the Embraer 145 helped me since I had been a captain on it before.
Right.
And that's what I flew for most of my career prior, because flying the airplane came back pretty easily, and it was just so much fun. Like, I was so excited to be back. So the whole ground school and, just getting through training was easier than I thought. Upgrading, I think my biggest thing with upgrading was, here I am, a captain at this airline, and I've only been here 6 months. So it's a little bit scary, just making sure I'm going to be able to do a good job.
Yeah.
And
but it's like, it's not the flying that's scary, right? It's the details of the job.
Yeah.
Like,
just all the
where does this go in the log?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do they do it here?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So,
do we say positive rate or positive climb?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we all know the rule of primacy. How many times do you call for a checklist? Oh, I know that was the other airplane. Hold on. Yeah. And as we get older and more experienced in the industry and have more time under our belts, then you have these, when you're tired, this calling for a wrong checklist or the wrong verbiage, and you're kind of bending that SOP because you're going back to that rule of primacy on maybe that previous aircraft that you flew, or that first aircraft you flew, or at Legacy. I mean, not now, but a couple of years ago, they were changing our checklist like every few months. So they wanted to have all the fleet types have very similar verbiage in all of their checklists and procedures. So they were changing like every few months. You'd get a new checklist, and so you'd have to, get all this verbiage down, and that was very, very intimidating. So between that and learning a new procedure, flight manual that talks about how the company does this, and the regulations on visibility and all this stuff, and limitations with the company imposed limitations on a fleet or an airplane. And it's pretty intimidating. And to be there only 6 months, I can totally understand how that could be a little bit of a challenge. But you got through it. You succumbed into getting into that position of responsibility, and you looked very happy from all your posts on social media and flying with really good crew members. And I always enjoy seeing photos of the crew together. Hey, we're on this overnight, check it out. And
yeah.
So you had a good time. And the kids,
Yeah.
did they transition with having mom gone a little bit more often now? Okay, or were there any hurdles there?
Yeah, they really have, and I think it's been really, really good for them, because me being home all the time, and I like things the way I like them, and I would do a lot of the stuff. And when I went away to work, Tyler was like, they're doing their own laundry, they're making their own lunch, they're riding the bus to school.
I bought an alarm clock.
Yes.
So, here's a thing that you might not know, but a lot of pilots are kind of type A.
Really? I know that type A person.
And Jeri is a pilot. She's the type A of type A.
I'm type A for both of us because he's type B. He's not a normal pilot.
No.
So, yeah, so they grew up a lot when I went and took a lot more responsibility, and it's been great. It's been really good for them. So
yeah. So now you got the 4 young adults running around the house. And anybody in college yet?
Not yet.
Not yet, almost.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
And any of them interested in aviation, more importantly?
Nobody is interested in aviation.
No. Isn't that crazy? Not, yeah.
No.
I'm the same here. My daughter's like, nope. Not at all.
Yeah. And we want them to do their own thing, They should find their own passion, and they are. Every one of them is completely different. They have their own thing, and they're happy with it.
So here you are, you're back in the saddle, flying on a regular basis, a captain at what we call Sandpiper Regional, and enjoying your time there, enjoying the flying. And you guys did a little move, didn't you? You moved back kind of where it all began.
Yeah, so living in Atlanta, we wanted to live somewhere where we could both work and not commute, especially with both of us in the industry. So we looked around, and the Chicago area seemed like the best place, no matter where I ended up, for the most part.
Yeah, and this was even prior to you getting hired by Sandpiper Air.
Yeah, that's right.
We kind of moved to Chicago on spec because, what do we call it?
Domestic Air.
So Domestic Air has a base in Chicago, as does every other major airline but one.
Right.
And we decided, let's move to Chicago because we don't know where Jeri's going to end up in her career.
Right.
Yeah, and several regionals have a base there, so it seemed like the best opportunity to hopefully both be based in the same city.
And they have really good food in Chicago.
Oh yeah,
which is probably the most important.
Yeah, every culture, every nationality, it's all there. So Chicago was home, and you were able to progress, and you were both living pretty much in base. And how did that progression work, Jeri? You were there at the Sandpiper Regional for how long?
2.5 years.
2.5 years there, and applied, went through the interview process at Domestic Air. And how did that work?
Got hired.
Was it a tough interview or?
The interview was wonderful. Like, they made you feel, the actual interview, they make you feel very comfortable. So it was a really nice interview. With Tyler having had worked there and been on property there the last 5 years, I knew what a great company they were and how they treat their people. And the interview was not any different. It was like you're just part of the family. So it was a very good interview. Prepped a lot, studied a lot for it. Tried to do what I could to be ready to interview. But it went very well, and I had to wait about 2 weeks until the decision board makes their decision after all the people that interviewed that week interview. And the day, then what day they're going to be making that decision. So you're hoping for a phone call with a job offer. And so Tyler and I were both home and doing things around the house that day. And eventually he comes in the room and offers me a job.
I had worked it out with my chief pilot ahead of time. He actually approached me, our chief pilot in Chicago said, when Jeri gets the job, because I absolutely believe she will, do you want to be the one to hire her? And I said, of course. Yeah, that would be awesome. And so we were both home that day, and I got to give her the job offer, which was one of the coolest things that ever happened.
We were both, he starts doing, giving the job offers, and I start tearing up. He starts tearing up. It was, more sentimental, than when he proposed. We were both crying and happy. And
well, talk about full circle. It began, you guys, became a couple as your first 121 operator, and here you are kind of at the tip of the pyramid, I dare say. You're both at a carrier where, I don't know about what your personal ideas are, but you easily could just call that your, retirement carrier. It's there. And so full circle, you get to hopefully fly together. Have you flown together?
Not here.
Not here, not yet. Not yet.
Yeah, I haven't upgraded yet. And the Max, this new deal, that's kind of slowed down my upgrade. I probably could have held it by now. But I joked about a year ago, and I told Jeri, I don't think I'm going to upgrade because I'm really enjoying my schedule. She said, oh no, you're going to upgrade because I'm going to fly with you again.
Yeah, she's got to keep an eye on you. Make sure you're honest. Make sure you're running that checklist appropriately, sir.
I'd say all over.
And what was the toughest question, Jeri, in that interview?
They asked me what the hardest part of training would be. And so the hardest part was, and what I thought it was going to be, I had only been typed on the Embraer 145. And so transitioning to getting typed on not only a much bigger airplane, but, much different, and just training on a different airplane, which I hadn't done.
Yeah.
Except for one time in my career. So that was definitely the hardest part. I thought, well, that's how I answered it. I thought that would be the hardest part, and it was. But I had a really good study partner at home, and so that helped.
Yeah.
And training in general, they just backed you up all the way. Everything was positive.
Yeah.
Anytime you needed help, before you even knew you needed help, making sure you had what you needed, and great group of classmates that stuck together and studied together, and so it ended up being a great experience.
Yeah. And which system do you think was the most challenging on the 7.3?
It's the VNAV.
Oh, well.
That's the toughest system on that airplane.
That is true, because, and especially, I had never had VNAV, vertical navigation, before in any aircraft I flew, and there's so many different ways you can use it. So I'm still getting used to that now, being on the line the last 6 months.
Yeah. Yeah, and we mentioned earlier that while you were at Sandpiper, you took the opportunity to become a LOSA pilot. Can you give us a little information? First, what does LOSA mean, and what is involved in that?
Yeah, so LOSA is a line observation safety audit. It's a part of the safety department, which every airline has. Safety is always our number one concern. So it's a group that has a pilot will go sit on the jump seat of any typical line flight and make sure, just observe. You're not there checking anybody. You're not in charge of anybody. You're just watching how they conduct the flight crew, and anything that's inconsistent with our SOP, you're logging that, or anything that's good though too. It's not bad things. Anything that could change policy may be or procedures in the future. So you're just logging details about their flight. And the LOSA observer, and that's what I started at. I wanted to get more involved with something at the airline, and at the time, the LOSA was hiring. So I was able to get on there, and so I would go on line flights and observe other crews and write a report afterwards about what they did, just what they did in general, good, bad, or other. And eventually, the analyst that analyzes all these reports that comes in, he went over to Legacy Airlines, and I was able to apply and get his position analyzing all those reports that the observers turn in all throughout the month. And so reading all those reports and getting the information into something that our manager of safety can read and have an idea, a big idea of what our line pilots are doing.
Yeah. So SOP, just for the listeners that may not understand, standard operating procedures. So every airline has a standard to the way they operate every particular type of aircraft on the fleet. And at Legacy, they had two different types at the time. Actually, I think three with the introduction of the 175 Embraer. And so since you were typed on the 145, you were doing LOSA reports for the 145. And as you mentioned, those safety audits are an integral part of making changes to the training through the AQP program. So if the analyst conducts the reports, sends it to the director of flight, and they say, well, we've seen an increased uptick of flap overspeed or incorrect, gear up calls or something. So whatever that particular analysis shows that is not being done either correctly or possibly being done correctly, but is causing another issue. So anytime that data reveals that, then it's up to the director of safety to get together with director of training and adjust the training cycle in the simulator to correct this action or change the way they do things. So it's a pretty major event, major job, and a major job position. And wow, that's a really impressive thing. How long did you do that for?
Almost the whole time I was there. Started as an observer, sometime as an FO, and then continued to do it. So probably about 2 years.
Wow.
Little over 2 years.
Any challenges with that position?
It was time consuming. We had to, when you're an observer, you go observe flights on your day off or after you conduct your own flying. So I did have to put in some extra time. And as an analyst, taking the time to read all the reports and do a thorough briefing on them. So mostly time. It was an interesting job because you're seeing it. I think it makes better pilots if you're an observer. You get to watch crews and really just watch what they're doing, and you may not do something like they do, or be like, oh, that's a good way to do something that's outside of SOP, how people handle things.
Yeah, particular techniques that have been developed on the line, sure.
Yeah, so it's a good learning experience as a pilot yourself, and then as an analyst reading what everybody else is writing about. So it was a great experience.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely time, just the time with work, not only already working and having the family at home, but still great experience and a good department to work in.
And Ty, have you participated in any kind of extra organizations through either of the carriers that you've flown for?
Yeah, I was a union rep for a little while. I think I did it for about 2 years because I wanted to give back, and that was super time consuming. I was an ALPA rep. I was a pilot-to-pilot rep. Before everybody had the internet, we did the phone tree. I organized a whole bunch of pilots to disseminate information. I think it's probably less time consuming now for a rep to do what I did, but
Yeah. You were before the age of social media pages and email blasts and things like that. So yeah,
exactly.
it's a lot of work.
Yeah. And then, and since then I've just been a line pilot. I enjoy my job. I love my job. I love my company, but I also enjoy my time, my free time. So
yeah, it's one of the great things about this profession is, yes, at the beginning of the journey, you will be on reserve, commuting, dealing with, 10, 9, 11 days off at home, of which some of those days might be commuting, some of those days might be recovering.
yeah,
And it's very tough, but as you progress in seniority, if you can move to base and have that quality of life increase, and as the income increases, the quality of life increases and the schedules get better. And so, after you pay your dues for the first couple of years in this profession, there are definitely benefits to flying the line and having that time at home.
yeah,
And there's plenty of organizations to get involved with. We mentioned earlier in our pre-interview discussion, Jeri, that you were also involved with Women in Aviation. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about that organization?
Yeah, so Women in Aviation, it's an international organization to help women, and not only, I mean, that's how it was founded, but it helps men as well nowadays. But just to help get more people involved and interested in aviation, and they have scholarships to help people with flight training. So it's a great organization to help get more people interested in this career field.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'll put a link in the show notes as well for those interested to learn more about it. You can go to the website in the show notes for the Women in Aviation program. And now I wanted to just ask both of you, kind of maybe back and forth, a few questions that really highlight the journey so far. And, we've talked about how juggling a family and juggling this career and progression in this career and trying to constantly be moving forward, it's very difficult. And there are many conflicting demands between personal and professional lives. And what do you think so far in your journey has been the biggest challenge to juggle all of it?
Yeah. Probably scheduling.
That's what I was thinking, are schedules, because you bid line and on seniority. Now, right now, Jeri's super junior, so we have to kind of almost figure out what she's going to get awarded, because I can hold a spectacular schedule right now. I could work Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday every week, and she works weekends. So if I bid the schedule that I can hold, we would never see each other. If I bid the schedule that she can hold, we'd both be gone when the kids are home. So it's kind of that, trying to figure out, okay, how much overlap do we want?
The logistics of it all
going on,
Yeah. So scheduling demands when you're a couple flying with a family, definitely the biggest challenge from what I'm hearing.
Yeah. And I know a lot of people do bid opposite each other that have kids, and they're able to, raise their kids and both work.
Mm-hmm.
And, a lot of people do it that way. And we try to actually bid the same, because we luckily now have family living with us that we've hired to take care of the kids while we're not home. So that works out for us really well. We can work at the same time if we want to, and all be home the other 4 or 5 days a week.
Yeah. And we've mentioned it before too. I mean, I think the secret, and everyone I've interviewed in the past has kind of said the same thing. The secret is balance. You have to have a balance with both your career, your personal life, your family, your spouse. And if you don't balance it all out, something's going to tip. And it sounds to me like the schedule is the biggest challenge for you since you're both flying. And that's got to be a challenge to keep that all in balance and into play.
Yeah, and it is. And luckily, unlike, back in the regional days when I think it's getting better, schedule flexibility. But when we were at Trans-States, it was not flexible. And now at domestic air, it's extremely flexible. So that helps us a lot. We can usually do what we need to do with our schedule to make that balance work.
Yeah, we do. There's a lot of trading, and there's a lot of picking up or trading with the company, other pilots, and we can really re-engineer. So whatever you get awarded as far as your schedule goes, it's not the final schedule.
Yeah.
You can keep adjusting it throughout the month.
Trip trade and whatnot. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you both been in and out of the cockpit for, multiple decades now. What is the best way in terms of giving advice to a newer aviator out there to deal with conflicting personalities in the cockpit? It's a very common question that I hear a lot. And I just wanted to get your 2 cents on it.
Personally, I feel if you have a conflicting somebody that's has a conflicting personality, I how to say this. I can mostly get along with anybody. So if I've flown with the captains before that our personalities definitely conflicted, not very often, I haven't flown luckily with very many of them, and mostly they've been like you and Ty, and they're great. But don't get angry at the situation. Don't try to stand up for yourself if there's something they're doing that that could be an issue, a safety issue, or just the environment. Stand up for yourself. And I find that often that will kind of bring them back down, bring them, like, if you don't let them let them know.
Don't feed the fire. Yeah, for sure. But at the same time, like you said, stand up for yourself and say, that's not the right way to do it. I don't feel comfortable with this, or a lot of times it's not in the flying that is the issue. It's the personalities that just don't mesh, and not letting people get to you is really the best bet to rise above, to stay above all that. How about Tyler? What about you?
Yeah, I find again, and it depends on your personality, because I'm the same way, Jeri. I think I get along with most people, and I think that's essential. I think that as an airline pilot, you're stuck in a tiny, tiny room with another person for hours at a time, and you kind of have to find that common ground. I find it easier as a first officer than I did as a captain.
Really?
When I was a captain, I felt like 9 out of 10 times everything was fine, and then you'd get the one first officer that thought he wanted to be a captain.
Yes.
Challenging you a lot.
Yeah.
And so that was harder for me. I'm not the captain now. I would do things different than that guy would do, or that girl would do. But it's not really a big deal because it works out both ways. So there's, and so I think that's what it is. I think you just don't have to be in charge all the time, maybe.
Yeah. And you long career, you've, I'm sure, had more than a few emergency situations. Can each of you describe probably what comes to mind as the biggest emergency you've ever had?
Yeah, I've only had one true emergency where I had to declare an emergency. And that was a flat failure on the Embraer 145 at Sandpiper. And I was a brand new captain after my 6-month upgrade. And flying out of LaGuardia, and it was snowy and 200.5, and the ceiling was 200 and the visibility is a half mile in snow. And so the flaps, those that don't know, you need them to help you slow down on landing. And they weren't going to come back down. We got an indication that they were up, but they were failed and they weren't going to come back down. So we ran our checklist. We are discussing our options with the bad weather on the East Coast. We were supposed to be heading to Nashville. And so we decided to divert to an airport that did not have the weather, had very long runways, and equipment there that could help us if we needed to. So that was an interesting flight. We had to make those decisions, and we made a good decision to divert to an airport that didn't have, that was the best
option for you. Yeah. What airport did you divert to?
Columbus.
Okay.
Columbus, Ohio, CMH. It was one of our main maintenance bases. So, and it had long runways and the crash and fire rescue.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, very harrowing, especially as a new captain. I mean, so you're dealing with this emergency and you're like, oh, come on! Really? Today? It's going to happen today?
And the best part, I'm about a 30-hour captain there, and my first officer had about the same amount of time at all in the airplane.
Yeah.
So he was new in the right seat and new to the airline, and I was new in the left seat. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that could be definitely. That was a common thing. I think I had 2 instances of flap fail on the Embraer 145. I don't know, because they had that asymmetrical. Yeah, once as an FO going into snowy, where was it? I think it was La Crosse, Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and we ended up continuing and did all the calculations. The captain says, well, we've got the landing distance. It's not snowing. It was snowing, but it was not snowing at the time. They just plowed the airport runway. So all the numbers, work. So we continued. And sure enough, maintenance had us do a electrical reset procedure over the phone, which was approved at the time. And here comes the flaps coming back up, and go figure. Yeah. So common issue on the Embraer 145. Good section of the QRH to study prior to getting out on the line is the flap fail procedure. How about Ty? How about you? Any major events?
Oh man, I don't know if I'm lucky or unlucky. When I went to interview at the airline that brought me to my current airline, Domestic Airlines, I sat down with the chief pilot, and he said, have you ever had smoke in the cockpit? I said, yeah, twice. And he goes, have you ever lost an engine on a jet plane? I said, yes. I lost my engine one time on the Embraer. And he goes, how about hydraulic failure? Yeah, I had a full hydraulic failure on the Embraer.
Oh my God.
And he just kept asking me questions. He finally stopped. He goes, all right, don't bring any of that nonsense over here. Yeah, maybe. But that's why we have checklists, and that's why we have procedures. None of it ever scared me or really got my blood going. Even when, and I lost an engine on the 7-1 also, but so I did end up bringing some of it over. But when I lost an engine on the Embraer, we were climbing out. We were through about 30,000 feet, and we heard an enormous bang. No real indication, no real engine indications, and I think on that airplane there's an ITT gauge. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm having to think back 10 years now. The ITT, I think, was running just barely hotter on the number 1 engine, and everything else was kind of normal, but the airplane didn't seem to want to keep climbing. And So we figured something was wrong. We had the flight attendant check in the cargo compartment for maybe something blew out or maybe something exploded. So we were only kind of half thinking that it was an engine. And one of the passengers had reported that he saw a flash out the left side of the airplane. And on further investigation, there were big holes on the inside of the cowling. So we knew that something happened to that engine. We ended up shutting it down, turning it around, coming back to St. Louis. And when I got out of the airplane to see what the actual damage was, the spinner on the engine, the bullet on the engine had separated, and it came out, like 30,000 feet, full power. We were still climbing. Shrapnel all down the side of the airplane, and we figured the big boom was probably a compressor stall from the engine just blowing it forward.
Yeah.
And I mean, it ended up being kind of uneventful because we shut it down and we just flew it like you do the sim and came back. It took a little extra power on final and landed fine. No big deal.
Yeah. And, as an aviator, going through all the training that we do through every cycle that we have, I mean, how many cycles have you gone through over the past couple decades? And you're constantly different airplane, maybe, but you're training for the same thing over and over again. All the things, all those emergency scenarios in the simulator, which, I mean, these multi-million-dollar simulators do an excellent job at recreating all the sensations that you're going to feel in the actual airplane if it happened in real life. And so you actually had it happen at altitude. And was it just like in the sim?
At that point, at that time in history, it kind of wasn't, because the only engine failures that we practiced were on takeoff and maybe, pattern altitude, 3,000 feet or something. And so it was very different. We'd never practiced a high altitude engine failure, but there was plenty of time to analyze the situation. Nothing was on fire, thank the gods, and we just kind of ran the checklist and dealt with it. It flew very similar to the way the simulator flies on one engine. It was easier than flying the simulator on one engine, significantly easier, because it was VMC. You could see the runway. We just shot a nice, easy visual approach.
Yeah. So a single engine approach to land, as you do in the sim on an engine failure or V1 cut or whatever you do. In the sim, it's very sensitive and it's kind of difficult. It's always IMC down to minimums. But here you are in real life doing it, and not as touchy, maybe.
Yeah, not nearly as well. Like you hit on it. It's almost always weather down to minimums. You're in the clouds. You're having to. I mean, we have 5 times as many verbalizations on an instrument approach than we do on a visual approach. So it was certainly less busy, and also there's more time to kind of wrap your head around a single engine approach. You talk about it. The flight deck, we talk back and forth. Okay, remember this. You need a little more power on final. We can only land flaps. What was it in that airplane? 9, I think, with a single engine, or 22.
22.
Yeah, Embraer 22. Yeah, flaps 22.
Yeah, 22. So it was. I think it was a lot easier than the sim, just because the workload was spread out over a long period of time, and you weren't having to, oh my God, I just lost an engine. Turn around, land the airplane. Oh, the clouds are all the way down to the ground.
Oh yeah, and, go around, single engine. Oh, okay, come back around. Now VR only. Okay, autopilot off. Yep.
The work was certainly less, but it flew very similar to the sim. I mean, you said earlier also that simulators are spectacular. The ones that we train in are almost identical to the airplane. sometimes you have to kind of do a reality check and say, oh, wait a minute, this is a video game. It's not the airplane.
Well, yeah. And sometimes when you're sitting in an airplane and it's dark outside, God, this feels just like The Sim.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's completely interchangeable, right? Yeah. That's what those simulator check airmen and simulator instructors always tell you before you go in there. All right, treat it like the real airplane. It's not, because they want you to not to go, well, it's just a simulator.
That's not true though, because they won't let me take my freaking coffee into that simulator.
Right? Well, not even a sippy cup. I know.
Right?
So far, let's just talk about domestic air. What's your favorite layover?
I just did it actually. We do a Punta Cana, Dominican Republic layover where we get about 24 hours in an all-inclusive resort on the beach. That's just, it's like, I can't believe they're paying me to do this.
Yep. Jeri, how about you?
Yeah. So far, because I haven't done, had the opportunity to do all of our overnights, but I really like San Juan.
Yeah.
And I've heard some interviews of you going to, when you were down in San Juan, but San Juan.
That's a close second for me, by the way.
Yeah, we stay somewhere with a nice resort and,
Oh, you do? You stay in a nice place?
Yeah. So I have done that one.
Nice.
Yeah. And actually on New Year's Eve, I had a San Juan overnight and Tyler was off. So he came with me on my overnight on New Year's Eve. And I was flying with the captain that he had already flown with and is a great guy.
Yeah, probably my favorite captain too. So we had a good time. Trip.
Yeah. You get probably, some people are fortunate and get more, but I think you get about half a dozen really good trips, really good layovers in a year, and you end up just, everything comes together. Good crew, good flight attendants, good layover, good food, good fun, safe overnights with a nice warm bed and a quiet hotel room, no little league events happening, to keep you up all night. But, sometimes these events happen, and the fact that you guys get to share them together, that's really cool.
Yeah. And Tyler, we don't know what's going to happen, of course, with next month, with the current situation, but he has the same Punta Cana overnight next month, and he said he'll trade with me.
Yeah, there you go.
I will.
What a good husband is that?
That's right. I'm the best husband ever.
He'll go on reserve so I can have his. Now, he said that once all this coronavirus stuff started happening, but
yeah, good timing, Ty.
But no, yeah. So that part's nice too, that we can trade with each other like that if we want to.
Yeah.
The pilot to pilot trade is always works out pretty good, especially when you're together. That's great. So let's say you can go back in time just for a moment and whisper in your own ear as you're starting this journey. What would you tell yourself?
I don't know, man. I think I would say, when you go to upgrade at your first airline, there's going to be this really cute chick in class. Don't let her go.
Well, you didn't.
I know. So, am I a time traveler or not?
Oh, it already happened.
Right?
Gosh.
I would have pursued domestic airlines a lot harder earlier on in my career, because we work at a fantastic place. You don't know until you get your feet on the ground. And I think that's a lot of the reason why Jeri came over here also is, I love going to work. It hadn't always been that way. Other places I've worked, it's a good job. It's a great job. If you got to work, this is the kind of job to have, right?
Mm-hmm.
But working here is, I wouldn't say I'd rather go to work than stay home, but I don't hate going to work. It's a pretty good deal. And when they ask me to stay an extra day, I don't argue. I'm not upset about it. I say, okay, that's just
part of the job.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know. I'm not personally. I like the way my whole career has gone. It was being a passion from a young kid, having my parents, giving me the opportunity to do it, and then starting out so young at a regional. And I do wish, if I would have been able to get on at a major um, before we started a family, that might have made a difference in the rest of my career. But then I also love that I was home all that time with the kids and the general aviation that I flew during that time and the people I worked with and met. And everywhere I've worked, it's been a blast and a lot of fun and great friendships and fun times. I guess for anyone that's like looking back for myself, I think I wouldn't really change anything. But for maybe young people getting into it, like, don't think there's anything you can't do. I find, especially as a female in the industry, a lot of people look up in the cockpit and still have a surprised look on their face and say, "Oh, I didn't know women could fly," and or something to that effect. And people still say that.
2020.
And I would want people to know, like little, young girls, or that anybody can do it. And I never had that doubt, and that never even crossed my mind as a kid. Like I liked flying for some reason, and I was able to go do it, and I had luckily with support from my family. But yeah, that anybody can do it, and there's a lot of opportunities to get into it as a young person.
Yeah.
So,
which leads me to my next question. So it's a trying time right now in the industry, and that goes without saying. But we're going to bounce back. We've bounced back from terrible events before, and I don't think this is going to last as long as, say, the 9/11 disaster, because this is a little different. This is a completely different scenario, and this quarantine and this virus, and then once we get some kind of shot to a vaccination to help minimize the effects and everything, things are going to bounce back, because here we were on a very big uptick. I mean, it was astronomical how fast the industry was growing, how fast technology and population, and we really become a very small planet. But a young aviator in today's marketplace is going to really be panicking right now. And, the title of my last show was Don't Panic. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And it's easy to say, but I think we all kind of need to hear example after example after example of why we shouldn't panic. Now, both of you have lived through 9/11 scheduling issues, and here we are happening with the MAX issue that directly affected in domestic air and its operation. And now this. If I'm a young aviator, say a CFI, building my time, my apps are out, maybe I have a job interview coming up, maybe I'm at a regional and I had a flow through number coming up soon, and now I'm freaking out because there's giant unknown, and we hate the unknown, especially as aviators. We hate the unknown. We want to have that checklist for what to do next. What advice would each of you give a young aviator in today's marketplace about how to handle our current situation?
Yeah, I'd say just keep at it. This will pass. We've gone through things before, and that's how the aviation industry is. So unfortunately, they'll probably, as they get into the industry, they'll probably have to experience something once they're in it. But if you have the passion to fly, then keep going. And even if you have a setback, and you have to do something else for a while, if nobody's hiring, stay in it and keep after your passion, because the job is worth it. It's a great job. I love going to work too, and I've loved going to work at everywhere I've worked. I haven't had one place that I was not happy with. So even though some of them had more struggles than others. So yeah, keep going no matter what setbacks you might have at this time. It's going to get better.
Yeah. And Ty?
Yeah, that's pretty much what I think too. I think you need to look at yourself and say, is this worth it? Do I love flying? Because it's going to be hard sometimes. It's going to be easy sometimes. And just a year ago, it was almost unprecedented, the kind of growth that we're having. It was so easy to get into the majors, and I'm going to have a spectacular career, and that's great. But if you really want this, you'll have to stick out the hard times too. I mean, we went through the 90s, we went through 9/11. Now we got to deal with this. But I can't see myself being anywhere else. This is the job that we did everything we could to get here, and you've got to have that kind of passion, I think. So if you don't, do something else.
Right.
But if you love this and you want this to be your life, go for it and just ride it out, because things change.
Yeah. And I think that conversation is a very popular one. There are those in the industry that, we show up, we go to work, and we love being there. We love the fact that we get to command an aircraft, through the skies, and we get to see views from the flight deck at 37, 38, 39,000 feet that most people of the world will never get to experience firsthand. And we get to fly with some amazing people most of the time, if not, I say almost all of the time, are like-minded individuals, technical people, with similar personalities. And you get to do this job, and it's amazing. And if you're coming to work and all you're talking about is being at home and not wanting to come in today and not wanting to fly, and the company's, got me, bent around an axle because they changed my schedule and I don't want to be here. Then find something, like you said, find something else to do, because to be miserable flying an airplane, you bring that misery, and it spreads like a virus. And everyone around you is like, oh God, really? I'm gonna fly with this guy
here, right?
Yeah, we all have. Yeah.
Here. I flew, like I said, I've instructed 6 days a week, flew charter on my 7th, and 3 of those nights I went out and flew freight with my buddy to build time. So there were literally weeks that I had more time in the air than I did on the ground, just trying to get where I am. So if you have that kind of passion, go for it. Stick it out.
Yeah.
Sometimes things suck, sometimes they're good, but
yeah. Well, one last question for us today. As we're wrapping it up, I want to again say thank you for taking the time to sit down with me and give your journeys the time they deserve with the listeners, and explaining to us how you've made it work throughout all these years. But the last question is this. I want both of you to think back to a person from your life that has made the greatest impact to your success in aviation and in your career. Who would that person be, and why?
He's leaving us with the toughest one, right?
Yeah, do you know?
I do.
All right, go ahead.
I'm going to say it's Jessica Hurst. I'm not sure what her last name is now, because I think she got divorced. She was the chief flight instructor at Wings Aviation when I first started. She's the person who hired me and gave me my first paying gig doing this. And I wanted to do it. I was all in. This was my career plan, but it wasn't real until she gave me my first job. So I think Jessica is probably the person who had the biggest impact on me.
Yeah.
And I've had so many good mentors throughout my career.
Was it me?
Well, you're one of them. Yeah, I mean, you're definitely it's amazing, looking back, how many really good friends they're like family that come from, previous jobs, and friends. Like I'm still in touch with, some people I flight instructed, and um, many people from all the jobs. But so I've had a lot of people help me along the way, give good advice, just fun to, great to fly with. Coming over to domestic air, I had so many people help me, from trans states that worked there, a lot of them, and some at Sandpiper that were there, all helped me do what they could to recommend me, help me get a job there. So there's way too many to name, just to all who helped me, but I'd say just from starting out, and sharing the passion of aviation, probably my dad. I now having kids, and if they, they want to learn if they said they wanted to learn how to fly at 16, I don't know that I would be like, yes, let's go get you a lesson.
Yeah.
That they were, my dad and my mom, but that they were so supportive of letting me do that at such a young age, and supporting me and doing it, and then my dad doing it along with me and letting me continue helping me to finish all my ratings and in college, and always being supportive of my career after that, anything that they could do to help.
Yeah.
So that was.
Yeah. And it's amazing, sometimes they're the littlest of things, but they make the biggest impact. And, both your examples are phenomenal. Just to have that one person that you can think back. I mean, there were so many, like you said, Jeri, along the way, but that one person that really kind of made the deepest impact. And it's nice, I think, to think about them and to celebrate their impact. So I thank you for sharing those moments and those people with us here. If you don't mind, let's talk a little bit before we wrap it up about what the industry is doing today. I know that we're all kind of on the seat of our chairs here, leaning in to see if we can get any kind of clue of what's going to happen. The truth is, we really don't know, because we're talking about government loans and bailouts. We're talking about leaves of absences and canceled new hire classes, and suspended training and upgrades. And so it's a very stressful, a lot of anxiety is going on along, not just with the country, but with the pilot group in aviation. And I'm looking at all the feeds from fellow aviators out there, from people in general aviation, flight instructing and working on their CFI, or CFIs working on applications to regionals, and so on and so forth. And it's a really stressful time right now. And I think it's important to kind of reiterate what both of you have been saying this whole time, without getting into the detail of this pandemic of COVID-19, which is just stay calm. We're going to get through it. Just keep at it. Keep doing what you're doing. This is a bump in the road. But every airline right now is daily coming up with ideas on how to survive this. And I can tell you that at Legacy Airlines, just yesterday, they announced that they have an LOA, a letter of agreement, with the union, and they've all signed off on it. And what they're going to offer is any pilot over the age of 62 years old can take an early retirement. If they approve and accept the early retirement, they're going to get paid 50 hours of flight credit per month until their 65th birthday. So we're talking potentially 3 years of part-time pay to stay at home. The reason they offered this is because they're trying to prevent having to furlough pilots, especially those that just went through training, are out on the line. And unfortunately, if the airline has to do a 30% reduction in workforce, that's about 5,000 pilots over at Legacy Airlines. And I fall within that. So I'm keeping an eye on it. I'm hoping enough people take this very generous early retirement or early out. There are other factors at play with parking airplanes. I know that a lot of the international wide body pilots, their schedules have been completely flipped upside down, and they're no longer doing the international routes. So I've already been reassigned throughout this month. A lot of the flying that I was going to do, where I'm flying 4 legs in a trip, now I'm only flying 3 because one of them is a deadhead. Why? Because they took the Airbus off that trip and put a 777 on there. So they're putting these international pilots on domestic routes to keep both the airplanes flying and the pilots flying. And they're really working hard at adjusting the schedule, reducing the flights to try to kind of weather out this storm. Yeah. Is there anything going on over at Domestic Air that you can share with us that they're making a sort of effort to help, minimize the effects here?
The one thing that one thing about our company that I really like is that they have a very long history of not furloughing, even in tough times. And I wasn't there, but right after 9/11, when most companies did furlough, they came to the union and said, we would like to pay your pilots a little bit less to keep everybody on property. And the union signed off on it, and all the pilots agreed. Right now, there's a kind of a social media campaign. We've got the guy that's the plug, the last guy on our seniority list, and it's Save. I can't remember his name right now. Probably shouldn't say it. Let's call him Bob. Save Bob campaign, and so the pilots are already petitioning the union and the company to take a little less pay just so we don't furlough.
That's amazing. And so that's just a testament of your work group there, your pilot work group, and the fact that they would campaign for that.
Yeah, it's amazing to read all the, the comments that different pilots are putting in, for this, and how overwhelming of a response it is.
Yeah. Now, hopefully it doesn't come to that. I don't want to take less pay.
Of course.
But I will save Bob if I have to.
It's time for t-shirts. Save Bob.
That's right.
Well, guys, thank you so much. This has been an amazing treat to listen to your journey, to listen to the struggles and the successes, and how you navigated this, journey in aviation. And there are a lot of people that are interested in how they can, progress and navigate their journeys, and hearing how everyone else kind of has their unique way, I think really does help in the community. So thank you for taking the time to sit down with me and have this discussion. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Any last words you want to share with any of our listeners?
Do a last word. Say the last word. Don't ever call your first officer honey on over the interphone, especially if you've got a stuck mic. That's my last word.
Sage advice, for sure. Well, guys, thanks again.
Enjoy your career.
Enjoy it. Absolutely. Thanks again for spending the time with us, and I look forward to chatting with you again.
You too, Tony.
Yeah, thanks.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that wraps up episode 32 of Squawk Ident. I would just like to say thanks again to Ty and Jeri for allowing me to interview them on their journey in aviation, not only as aviators, but as a couple going through the industry and all the challenges that surround that. At a time when all this pandemic crisis that the world is going through is bombarding us from every angle, from our phones to the TV to the radio and the internet and beyond, it is nice to kind of put that aside just for a moment and be able to talk to some people about aviation and the passions surrounding that. And again, I hope you're enjoying Squawk Ident. It is these journeys that really keep me going, and talking to people about their journey really has become another passion for me. And I hope listening to the show is something that brings joy to you as well. So are you enjoying Squawk Ident? I'd love to hear about it. You can visit our website at www.aviatortony.com. That's Alpha Victor, the number 8, Romeo Tango, Oscar November Yankee.com. There you can check out episode cover art that I produce for each independent episode. You can check out the episode archives, the pilot shop, and you can leave audio feedback as well. You can also contribute to the show and help us out with equipment, software, and marketing expenses by becoming a producer of Squawk Ident, either with a one-time donation or a monthly contribution, and PayPal is accepted. And now, check out the Flightline Photos tab. There, I do my best to put up as many photos from the flight line as I can to share the experiences of what it's like to be out there on the flight line. Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter users can also search Squawk Ident Podcast, or on Twitter, Aviator Tony and Squawk Ident, to follow us on the socials. If you are listening on Apple Podcasts and you like what you hear, it would really help us out if you could just leave us a review, like, and share the show. So, in closing, I would just like to say thank you for taking the time to listen to this grateful aviator. Keep the dirty side down, be safe, and take care of each other. And as always, wash your hands.